All right, any questions from yesterday's session? Or could we go ahead and continue?
If you can briefly touch on what we did yesterday, that would be good, just like a high-level description, kind of.
All right.
Only if everyone is comfortable with that.
All right, yesterday we've seen that the way to log into the BW system and the transaction code that we have is RSA1. One transaction code which is like a one-stop solution for everything. In the this transaction code, we call this as data warehousing workbench. We've seen the functional sites that are available here. Yeah, modeling being one of the functional sites where we'll be concentrating a lot. We have administration and the rest of them right underneath. We've also seen very briefly what exactly are the info areas, which are nothing but folders for organizing our data. We've seen what info providers are, on which we can actually go and do some reporting, which can stand by themselves. And we've seen what info objects are, the smallest units within BW which can physically hold data. These are info objects basically classified into two types. One is characteristics and key figures. And we've seen that to save them or to create them, you have two separate catalogs, one for characteristic catalog, one for key figure catalogs, and we individually go and create those objects in each of the catalogs. We've also seen what info sources are, which logically bring all the objects together within BW. We've seen what data sources are, both on the source side and also within BW what data sources are. Anything that provides data for the SAP system or the SAP BW system, we call that as a source system. And then we've seen how we can move data from the BW system outside through the Open Hub destination, and also process chains which help in automating the entire process of execution. So we went ahead and also created one info area for ourselves within the info provider menu. We created an info area called as BW training sessions or ZBW_training, which is the technical name. The moment you create an info area in here, you automatically have the info area also created in the info objects menu. And in the info objects menu, we've seen that we have two separate folders. We created two separate folders and we call them catalogs for characteristics and catalogs for key figures. Alright, so when we created the catalog for characteristics, I told you that anything that you create, if you want to use within BW, you will have to activate that object. And we have gone and activated the catalog for characteristics and catalog for key figures. We also went to the extent of going ahead and within the catalog is just a folder, it's pretty much empty. But we can go right click, once the catalog is created, we can right click on it and create the objects which will be specifically for the catalog that is created. Like if you want to create characteristics, you right click on the catalog and create only on catalog for characteristics. You would get only the characteristic info objects. And similarly, when you do it for the keys, it gives you only key figures. You cannot create key figures in catalog for characteristics. You cannot create characteristics in catalog for key figures. We've also seen we just created a very small customer number info object, and we've seen briefly what are the tabs that are available. We've seen what you have in general, what you have in the mix tab, what you have in. So if I double click on this customer number, so you'd have 4 different kinds of data types. You have characteristics, n characteristics or num-c, dates and times. These are the different data types available. You'll have to define the length as well. And then you have also Business Explorer, which is more to deal with the presentation layer. Then you have master data and text. I've also told you that what exactly is master data and how what are the 3 divisions that we have within BW. We call the attribute, the text, and the hierarchy together as master data. And then we've seen about attributes, and then we've seen finally about compounding. Alright, that we've seen about an example of a plant serving 2 company codes, how it gets the identity by compounding it with the main company code. Alright, so we've seen that. Did all of you get the access for the server?
Yes, Gina here. I didn't get it.
Okay. All right. Did you speak to Kalyan about it?
No, not yet. I thought I was going to resend.
All right. So I hope it should be sent. Just in case, just expedite it by sending an email. All right. Let me just give me 1 quick second, please. Let me just get some water. All right. So we spoke about the info objects yesterday before we concluding the session. So we'll continue from where we left off. So there, I told you there are basically 2 different kinds of info objects, right? One is your characteristics and key figures. Like in very normal language, we have dimensions and measures. Dimensions kind of break it down into on what basis we're trying to analyze, or characteristics also do the same thing, on what basis we're trying to analyze. And key figures will give you a picture about what exactly are we trying to analyze. All right. So, so let's try to go a little deeper into what the characteristics and key figures can do. Yesterday we seen very briefly about how we can go ahead and create a customer number info object. So in the tabs that you have basically information about uh, the data type, the length, and all that. Business Explorer. You have something here called master data and text. So and the moment you create, automatically, if you realize that there are a few tables that also get created along with it. So if you see something here called as the SID table /BIC /S ZST ZCST underscore NMB, our basic info object name is ZCST NMB. All right, and to that prefix you will have quite a few tables that get created with /BIC/S in the front. All right, or /BIC/ and then you have different names, either S or M or P, so H, so depending on that. But all of these, now let's say I'm talking about this table called as the SID table. What is an SID table? You have a concept in BW called as the surrogate ID concept, where for every master data that you create, a master data object that you create, you also will have a surrogate table that gets automatically created. The surrogate table basically holds information combining uh, the value of the master data with a numeric, meaning let's say you have a customer number C1234. So instead of that, the system will store a value like 1. Okay, so C1234. Wherever C1234 comes, you will have the value 1 there. Or the system somehow maintains that uniqueness across the entire landscape, but still it will maintain the value 1 for the customer. So similarly, you might have another on any master data that you have that you create. You will have a surrogate ID table created and also a surrogate value that will be created for the master data that is there in that particular object. All right. So similarly, if you go into the master data text, you will have the master data view created. You have master data attribute table created. You will have a text table created. All right, so all of these you have different, you will have a hierarchy table with /h created, and then you have a place where you can add attributes as well. So I told you yesterday about the attributes that we could create, right? Attributes, so basically you can describe the master data to be entities, or if you're talking about entity relation diagrams or way of modeling. So here you would find that there are basically two different kinds of entities. One is a strong entity and one is a weak entity. What exactly is a strong entity? A strong entity is something that can stand by itself without actually needing the help of any other information, like a customer number. A customer number you don't really have to have any other information. Customer number is enough for me to identify a row in my transaction data. But if you want to go ahead and get in more details, customer number is just a number. I just know C1234. What does C1234 depict? Does it give me any more information? Can it tell me what's the name of the customer? Can it tell me what region he is from? So all of that information can be brought in by combining or the weak entities can supply that information, like your customer region, your customer name, your customer designation, all that information. But these are weak entities, and these basically the information that they provide help you with understanding the strong entity in a better fashion. Like customer number is there, but the information that the weak entity give about, let's say, the customer's name or customer's designation, customer's region, that information will give a little more about the customer. And these weak entities are nothing but called as attributes. Okay, attribute is something that will give you more information about the main info object or characteristic. Now, it is not that an attribute is always a weak entity and it only acts like an attribute. You can create an info object of type attribute as well, so that it is always used as an attribute. But in generic terms, you don't create the master data as attribute, you will create it exactly as any other info object. Whenever it is needed as an attribute, you just drag that into the attribute section and you can create it as an attribute. But if you want to specifically use that to be an attribute, then you'll have to go and select a particular column and you have to make that to be only an attribute. Alright, so so if you go in here, you can select this option which says attribute only, which will mean that it will be used only as an attribute. So there are a few settings that you need to check for it to be created as either as attribute or master data or text or but the moment you create this master data, you will have the automatic tables created and the SID tables. Remember, the SID table is one of the main important concepts, so make sure you remember that. Also, you see that we always prefix with a Z, and I think I told you yesterday about this. You prefix with a Z just to make the difference that this is a customized or custom created info object and is not something that SAP provides. Alright, so if there is an info object that SAP provides, it usually starts with a 0 in the front. Alright, so it is from the business content. So you can right click on the catalog for characteristics and let's go and create another info object. We'll call that as material number. We'll start with the Z. Alright, so you'll have to define the data type and the length. Let's say here. Yeah, just check for consistency once and then we're going to activate the object. So you have customer number and material number created. Now let's go a little deeper and then try to understand. We have created info objects. Now, how do you actually load master data into the BW system? Alright, so what we do initially is we'll try to load it using flat files, and later on we'll see how to exactly import it from the ECC system as well. Okay, so now that you have a customer number, so it should have some information which it will match. Now, whenever you look at transaction data, your transaction data will always consist of information related to the master data that is available. Meaning, let's say a customer number has. Rajiv, can you mute your system? Hello. Alright, so whenever you're dealing with transaction data, let's say basic transactions, whenever they happen, you will have information that will basically consist of the master data that is available. Like let's say a customer M1, customer C1 will make a transaction M1 and that information will be available in the transaction data. Means that your transactions will happen only with the available master data, or else the master data is updated the moment the transaction happens. Alright, so your Mass data will be something like a referential integrity for your data that is coming through. Okay, so and you'll always keep updating your mass data and activating the data within it so that it's available with the latest data for reporting. So what we'll do right now is we'll try to go ahead and load some mass data into the customer number info object through flat files. This is one of the fundamental steps, so try to follow the steps. Let me know in case you have any issues following that. Alright, so customer number told you that if you go into, let's say, to the general tab, if you go into the SID table, so in this table basically you will have the customer number, which is the primary key. Apart from that you will have the SID value as well. So if you go into the contents part of it and execute, you just have a default value right now because you do not have any information for customer number. Alright, but later on as we go and write data into our info object based on individual mass data, the SID table also will be updated automatically. So the structure of this will be something similar to, it just has one information which is customer number. So you need to go and update that customer number, or you need to import that data related to the customer number itself. So now what do you actually need when you want to update? One thing is the customer number should be made as an info provider to load the data into that particular info object. So what I do is I will take this technical name, copy that, and I'll go into the info provider menu. Okay, and in the info provider menu we have the BW training sessions as the info area. You right click on that. At the bottom you have insert characteristics as an info provider. So you can go and select that and you can give the name of your info object in there. Okay, and if you press continue, so it will go and add that info object in here into the info provider menu. But there is one observation that you need to make. The actual info object that brings in is customer number, but basically is divided into two major sections. One is your attribute section, one is your text section. Alright, so you'll have to load data for both of them as well. So once you bring this in here, so let's say we need to load data for the attribute value. Okay, so now for you to load data to the attribute, the first thing you need to go into the source system, and I told you that we're trying to load data through a file system, so just go into the file system and see what are the different source systems that you have. Okay, so here you have, let's say you have something called as Z flat file. Okay, so what you do is double click on that, it will take you to an individual screen there. And so what, like how you have an info area on in the BW system where the info area is majorly for organizing data, you also have something called as application components within BW for organizing your data sources. So you will create the data sources within the BW system, but there are so many data sources that you'll have, so you basically break it down into application components. Alright, so the application components that you create will help you organize where your data source, and it's always better to have a similar naming convention that you have for your info area as well. So what I'll do is I right click on this application data source, right click, and you will have the option for create an application component. You're going to create an application component. We can name it as, let's see, you could actually do that, underscore application component. So we have something here called as BW training, and the hierarchy of how you create is first make sure that you have a source system, then under your source system you have the data sources that are created. But for the data sources to be created, you organize that data sources into application components, and application components under which you have the actual data sources. So right click on your application component, and then you'll find an option to create a data source. So when you have this option, click on create data source, and it'll ask you what is the name of your data source that you want to go and create. So the name is something like ZDS. And let's say we call this as the customer underscore data source. And what kind of data source is this? Is this we're talking about as mass data or transaction data or what? So we have to go and mention that. So we're talking here about mass data attribute data that you want to push to the customer number. So you select attribute and then click on continue. What we're trying to do here is we're trying to load data for the attribute value of the mass data. Attribute value is nothing but the actual value part of the mass data or the customer number. Alright, so something like C123, CEO. So that information you want to load. There is also a second part which is the text part of it. The text part will give you the description of that particular number. So in short, description we're going to put in So here you have a few fields. One is the general information. Then you have a second field which is called as the extraction field. Now the extraction field is where you'll define where your file actually exists. So what we'll have to do is we'll have to go and create a file. Let's say we create an Excel file. Okay. So we're creating something here called as the customer underscore number. And I'm giving in a few values like C001 to C20. Alright, these are my customer numbers, and I will go ahead and save as. I want to save this file as a .csv file. Okay, on my desktop, I'll go and save this as. This is the attributes, so I will go and save it as a comma delimited file. Okay, and click on the save button. I'm saving this on the desktop. So if you go to your desktop, you'll find this file zcst underscore attr. Okay. Now what's happening is we need to mention the file name where exactly it exists, and to select that file you can go into the file name, go to your desktop, and from there select this particular file which is zcst underscore attr. Alright, and I don't really need the header name, so what I do is I mention it as header rows to be ignored is 1. Alright, so how are we actually loading this file? Are we using it to be a default file, or are we creating it to be a CSV format? So since we're using a comma delimited format, so we'll go ahead and create it as a CSV fixed format. So instead of fixed length, go and select that to be separated with a separator CSV. You also have to mention what is the separator that we use. So data separator is in a CSV file is comma, the escape sign is the next is a semicolon. Alright, make sure that you give both that information. So your extraction will tell you from where you're picking that file. You'll also have a data separator as a comma and an escape sign as a semicolon. So once you give that information, the next thing is proposal is something that you would get from whenever you're pulling from BCC system. Don't have to worry about it. Then you can go to the fields tab. So in the fields tab, you have an option for field and info object. Give the info object name that you have created for this particular info object ZCST underscore NMR. Okay. So once you've given that information, just press an enter, copy. It says ZCL is not available. RSA1. What is the name of? Okay, NMB. Okay, press an enter, copy information, and you'll get information from the system, and then you'll create this structure. The reason why we're doing this is the moment you create the structure in the data source, this is the same structure that you have, or this is actually the structure that you're creating at the PSA level. I told you that the PSA is nothing but your persistent staging area, where your data that is coming from the source system is first dumped before it's actually picked up into the data targets. So here our data target right now is the customer number. The data that we're bringing in from the file is the actual source information. So the data has to first come and reside on the PSA or the persistent staging area. But the persistent staging area should understand what kind of data is coming through. So that's why we create a data source, and there we explain that this is the kind of data that is coming in. It's coming from an extractor or a text or from a CSV file, and this is the structure of data that is coming in. The structure that I give here, which is nothing but ZCST underscore number, the length of it, all that information is what it takes to go and create a PSA table or persistent staging area table. And once I create this, the system will be ready with the structure of the ZCST underscore number with characteristic length 10. So whenever you load the data into the BW system, it doesn't take too long for the system to accept that data because the structure is already created. So if you want to have a preview of data that is coming through, you just need to activate your data source. Just click on the activate button. And you can click on read preview data. So you can go ahead and see the data in here, which is nothing but the customer numbers from C001 to C20. Okay. So this is the data source, and this is how you have the data source ready to accept the structure from the PSA. All right. But you have not moved any data from, it's just the preview that you've seen, but your data has not moved anywhere into the BW system. So for you to go ahead and move the data into the BW system. What you need to do is you have one program here called as the info package. Alright, so we go in there, right click on a data source, right click on it, and you have an option for creating info packages. So info package is nothing but a program that will help you extract data from a source system and bring it into the BW system till the PSA level. Alright. So you can go and click on create info package. Info package underscore. Alright, so given the info package name based on the data that we're pushing in, that's the attribute data that we are pushing in, so I given the attribute name. So I can go ahead and click on save. So I have the first tab as data selection, where this tab will basically be helpful for us to selectively pick the data from our source side. So let's say you have a million records of customer numbers, and you want to pick only a particular range of customers from customers 2,000 or 20,000 to 30,000, and probably you also have some other specifications that they should be from a particular company code and all that. So if you want to do some selections here, you can include that selections in here and then pick up only selectively a particular set of data and not the entire set. Since you've defined the place from where the file should be picked, automatically that information will be passed on to the info package. So when you click on the extraction, automatically that information you will see that there. It will pick that information from the data source. Your processing happens only till your PSA level. I told you previously, before 3.5 and 3.5, you had data going on till the data target level itself, but with 7.0 and above, you have data only moving till the PSA, and from there your TTP takes care of pushing the data up into the data target from the PSA. Alright, so here you have the processing, and then you have the update where we're doing a full load, where we're pushing just the data. As much of data is available, the entire data set we're sending it. Later on, we'll study how to do deltas or incremental loads by pushing only a small set of data into the source. So once we go ahead and do the full load, then you can go and click on the schedule option. The schedule option will help you actually push the data when exactly you want to extract. Do you want to do it right now, immediately, or do you want to do it in the background at a particular time, or a particular based on a particular instance, or you want to trigger it off based on a particular time frame or a particular event, or does it depend on another job? So all that information you can give. So if I click on start later in the background, I have all these options, either immediately or a particular date and time after a particular job, after a particular event, or do you want it to be on the first day of the month, second day of the month. All that information I can go ahead and give. So I can tell which work day from the beginning of the month or from the end of the month, how many months should I be executing. So here scheduler has a lot of options. But right now we're trying to load it immediately, so we want to pick that data from the source file as it is, and then we want to push that data into our data target. So I can go and click on the start button here. So when I click on the start button, if you observe, I'll have a small tab that comes in which says data requested. So data was requested, and then you can go into something that looks like a monitor, or so you can click on that monitor tab, and you will find that data is added into the BW system. So if you look at it here, this is the data that is being pushed. It says that your data has been loaded successfully to the PSA level. And whenever your data is successfully loaded to the PSA, you would find this green and red combination, which means that data is successfully loaded in there. Alright, but in case your data is not successfully loaded, you will have different statuses for this traffic lights in here, which green indicates that it's successfully loaded. You also have other status options, yellow and red. So yellow is where your data is still being loaded. So if you have a huge file, so we'll see that the data will be still loading. It can also happen that sometimes data is stuck, your iDocs or something are not moving through, and because of which your yellow symbol stays on. So if you see that the yellow symbol is staying on for a duration that you think is a little too long, you can go and check what exactly is happening as well. You also have the red symbol where in case your data fails with loading, you might see this red symbol also coming through. So for now, we see that it's loaded with green. And if you go to the extreme right, you will also find the details of what has happened. So when you drop these details, usually you would find a handshake between the source and the BW system. So whenever we trigger off an info package, it means that it's asking the source system that is your data available, can I pick that data? So there you get a confirmation from it saying that, okay, I would give you that particular set of data. And then it starts posting in that data. So you find that 20 records have been sent, data selection ended, and then it will show you how data has been transferred. Okay. And you have a concept here called, apart from info package, is the program that picks up your data. You also have a concept called as data package. Okay. Now, whenever you're dealing with huge amounts of data and you're trying to bring that into the warehouse, you obviously into the warehouse you'd have huge amounts of data itself. When you're bringing in such huge amounts of data, you might have congestion in the network and all that. So to avoid all that, what they did is they broke it down into smaller segments. So if you have 1,000,000 records, the system will automatically break it down into smaller sets called as data packages. These data packages will have a certain amount of storage. So let's say it can handle somewhere around 10,000 records on one data package. So the system picks one data package at a time. It does not bring all of them at one shot, all the 1,000,000 rows. It will start off with data package 1 where it will push 10,000 records into the BW system. So those 10,000 records will come here, get processed, and then once they come into the BW system will say, okay, I've got the right information. So first 10,000 records, confirm that or acknowledge that, and then once you get a green signal from the BW that 10,000 records have been processed fine, then you go to the next set of 10,000 records from the source system, and that is called as the transaction RFC, which maintains that connection between both the systems. All right. So you see that
Emmanuel, Rajiv here had a question. In the PSA layer, when this data is first staged, in that layer, why is it that it doesn't move to the higher data targets from the 7.0 version? Why was that made?
you had different, okay, can you mute yourself? You had different functionality for, from the 7.0 for the info package. The info package limitation was maintained to push data only till the PSA. The DTP was allowed to push data from the PSA to any data target. Any movement within the BW system was assigned to the DTP. The reason was that the DTP was able to maintain the data push to multiple targets, multiple schedules using one DTP itself. So you had that advantage when you were using the DTP. So that's why they brought in this concept of DTP. They broke the info package functionality, which was pushing data directly to the data target, into two segments. One is your loading part till the PSA, where you would by default. So previously what we had was we could bypass even the PSA. We did not need to actually load data at the PSA. So they made that mandatory now that your data has to go and load first to the PSA, and then from there it will pick up using the DTP. So your reconciliation process also is a mandatory thing. So you compare your source with the data that is loaded as a part of your validations and reconciliations. So previously, if you did not have that information, if you do not have that rule that data has to be put at the PSA before you load, so you would actually push the data because it's taking a little time for you to drop it and pick it up from there. So you would usually bypass the PSA structure. But at the time of loading, in case there is any kind of an error, let's say an invalid character, your entire data has to be stopped. Again, it should be loaded to the PSA. At the PSA, you can go and correct your data, and then from there you can push the data into the data targets. But to accommodate these extra functionalities of loading multiple targets multiple times and with multiple schedules, your DTP was found to be more efficient than the info package. That's the reason you had the DTP come into picture from 7.0.
And what
Yeah, thanks, Emmanuel. Also, one more small adjoining question. Emmanuel, once you're through with this extraction process, right from the info provider, could you quickly take us down through all the steps there? Just, to make notes.
Yeah, right.
To get the sequence right, actually.
Okay. Someone else also was asking a question.
No, this is Chinayat. I was asking what is DTP stands for.
DTP stands for Data Transfer Process, DTP, Data Transfer Process. All right. So the info package pushes data till the PSA. This is the symbol for PSA, PSA maintenance. You can click on it. You'll find your data package as well. And if you want to see your data, just click on the continue button. You would be able to see if you're dealing with a huge amount of data. So you see that even for a data package, you have the value that is being maintained as 1, which means that the data package already has an SID value that is assigned, and so it will pick up that value. All right. So data is loaded till the PSA right now. This is the PSA structure that you can go and check. Now it has to pick from here, from the PSA, and it has to load till the data target, which is your attribute. So if you go into the info provider menu, okay, so you have the customer number, but you have the customer attribute still as it is. Now what you do is you want to go and connect your data source. Create transformation. This is where you join your data source with the actual info object that you've created. All right. So you have created a data source here, which is called as the CST_DS. The data that is coming in, so that is there at the PSA level. From there, you have to move that data to the data target. Now, both of these structures are separate right now, but for data to move in from here till your data target, you will have to go ahead and make a connection, and the connection or the tunnel through which data will move to that data target is called as transformation. So you can go into the info provider menu, right click on that particular attribute and then you can say create transformations. You could go ahead and tell the object name, which is data source, and you can mention the name of the data source as well. The source system was the flat file, so you mention the name of that flat file as well. And click continue. So once you do that, you'll find that the customer information from the data source is being pushed to the data target. So here at your transformation level, you have the opportunity to make some modifications based on your business rules that you have. If you click on the is equal to, there you would have a few changes that you can make. Here we see that it's a direct assignment that you're pushing. So you have different options here. You can send in as a constant, a formula you can write, an initial value you can give it. You can read it from or do a lookup from another master data table, or read it from another data source, or you can write an ABAP routine for calculating something which is more complex. Right? So once these are all the different rules that you can write at your transformation level before it is actually transferred into the data target. So now if you see, right click on this particular thing and say you want to see your data flow. So you can right click on the customer number and say display data flow. You will find that they're basically I haven't activated my transformation, so it's saying that data will be lost. Anyways, so this is the link that we have created. Now your text is not what we have set up yet. So if you see the attribute, the data coming in from a file system being pushed to the data source, from there connecting from the data source to the actual attribute value, you have transformation. So this is not activated yet. So what we will do is just go and activate this particular object. So once you activate, you will have a green symbol that comes through. It's activated successfully. Then you can go and right click and say your data flow. So that will bring you to show that the transformations are also active. So this leg of how you load data into the customer number is created. So you see that the customer number info object is only one, but you would have two different segments under it. One is the master data attribute, and then you have the master data text as well. All right. So we're right now connecting to the attribute value, and we're trying to load that data. So right under once that we've created this entire block, the data has come till the data source. We've seen that through the info package, which is the program that we use. The next thing, if you see here, you see this folder here called as DTP, data transfer process. By default, once you create this transformation, you would have the DTP come through, but usually if you right click on the DTP and say create a DTP, automatically it will tell you what is the source that you want to bring it from and what is the target that you want to bring it from. All that information will be populated automatically. But in case you want to go ahead and define your own DTP, you can do that as well. Right click on it and say create DTP. So it will tell you from where it is coming. The Z flat file is from where it's coming, and you're pushing the data till the ZCST number, and we're also telling that, okay, if you see, the DTP itself is bringing in that information about the object name, the object type, the subtype of the object to be an attribute, and the name of the attribute. All that is populating by itself. Okay, so even if you because you have that DTP already created in there under the DTP folder. Okay, but in case you want to go ahead and create a DTP on your own, you can do that also. So you can right click on this customer attribute and say create a data transfer process. In that you can go and mention whether from which source you want. You can go and change this information from something else. Alright, so to make things even more simpler, just go and right click on the data transfer process, right click on it and say create data transfer process. The system somehow connects your PSA structure with the DTP when you create it under this, and it will go ahead and so for you the execute button doesn't come up unless you activate the DTP. So you go and activate the DTP. Now you find the execute button in here. So click on the execute button and you will find that the request generated will now be processed. So you have all of these requests being processed. This is your data target, administer data target. If you go in here, you will find that data is loaded in the form of requests. So you have 20 records that are transferred, 20 records that are added, request date when it was, and then the status. You see this symbol here which says request is available for reporting, which means that this object can be right now reported on. Alright, so you can directly go and pick this and you can report on this object as well. So it's like it's a complete package. So in case you want to even look at the data, you can go into the contents tab and you can say look at the content, select the object that you really want to look at and say execute. So it will tell you the information that is loaded. You have not loaded anything relating to the text information, so you see that the language in the text part is pretty much empty. We will do that once we finish, and then you can see both the customer and the description data being loaded into that particular info object. Alright, your data is always loaded in the form of requests, so your request also becomes a part of your primary key, your request number. Alright, so let's try to understand it or recap what we've actually seen. Basically, your master data is something that is important for you to recognize your individual row of your transaction data. Your transactions can happen at any level, but to make sense of what transaction that is, you need master data. So in case, let's say you go to a shop floor and somebody asks you, you're buying some stuff, okay, you're buying detergent or you're buying something. So you say that you bought in 20 soaps and then each one is $4, so you end up paying $80 at the till. Now, you don't have to actually, just a second. Sorry about that. You don't really have to actually give information about what you bought, but you can directly pay those $80. You can give your bill for $80 and then you can pay it. But later on when you're trying to analyze your data, if you want to really look at, let's say you're trying to do an analysis based on the products that are being sold at a particular sales area, this information, if you want to point out to that transaction that has happened, and if you want to really go and look at what transaction was made for this $80, all that you need to do is get also information about that particular item that you've sold. That will be able to help you actually get the unique row for that transaction. Customer C1 has bought a detergent M1 and you will have that transaction recorded uniquely. So to space out individual transactions, you'll always need some reference data, and that reference data is nothing but your master data. Master data is something that doesn't change regularly. It stays on for a while, but there are possibilities when your master data might change as well. But on a majority of times, your master data doesn't change, so you say that master data is constant, but your master data can be added regularly from time to time. So let's say your detergent is there, you have let's say a soap one. Your soap one will remain to be a soap one for a while. You don't suddenly go and change that to be a soap 2 or soap 3 or any other name for that matter, because that will mean that you'll have to change a lot of other things as well. But like I said, your master data might change. Let's say a customer name or a customer number will remain same for a while. Your customer designation is something that might change over a period of time. You might not always be a consultant. You might be a manager someday pretty soon. And then your designation is supposed to change. So your master data also might change over a period of time. Then you come up with this concept of slowly changing dimensions, which is a little not connected with the topic that we have right now. Anyways, so just going through the different steps of how we could go ahead and create and load data into the master data. First thing, you make sure that you create your master data object, a characteristic. So for only a characteristic is the one that we will be loading data in this format, as you don't have to do that for key figures because key figures are generated by the transactions that you make. Master data is something that we'll have to give in that these are valid customers, these are valid materials where our transactions might happen. So you'll have to mention that. Your transaction data, when it happens, actually it will automatically be generated. All right. So once you go ahead and create your info objects, that's at your info object level. Once you create a catalog of characteristics, you can then create an object for customer number, and you will go ahead, and I hope you've kind of understood how to create a customer number. Just right click on this characteristics and say create an info object. You have multiple options you have for creating a characteristic and the long description. That is what is necessary. You all have other options like reference characteristics and template characteristics. So if you already have an existing info object type characteristic which has technical information pretty much similar to what you're trying to create, you can either create a reference or a template and then give that name. Automatically that object will be, the object that you're creating will be created in the kind of object that you are actually creating. So let's say you have a customer number already existing and it has some technical information. So if you say reference or you say template, so that the technical features of that object will be picked up and added to this new object that you're creating. You don't have to do this at this time. We can create a new characteristic and just give a long description. Make sure your characteristics do not follow, do not exceed, not less than 3 characters and not greater than 8 characteristics. The system cannot accept it. Once you've defined your info object, so these are characteristic info objects. For you to load data into them, they have to be first moved to the info provider menu. So if you want to move to the info provider menu, copy this info object name, technical name. If you see this here on the top, you find that this is the technical name. So copy this technical name and then go into the info provider submenu and right click on your info area, and you have to mention in there at the last thing which says insert characteristic as info as info provider. Alright. So once you click on it, the system will ask you what's the name of the info object. Go and mention the name of the info object that you want to import. Once you click on it, that particular object will be brought into the info provider menu. Right under that, you will have two again subdivided objects. One is the same customer number, but you'll have an attribute and a text object. You'll have to load data individually to attribute and individually to text. Alright, so let's say we're considering attribute right now, and for us to load data into the attribute, you need a framework. The framework works this way. Your data comes into the PSA. From the PSA, your data has to move to your data target, and between the PSA and the data target, your connecting tunnel will be your transformation. Alright, so what you need to do, just a quick second. Alright, so the connecting tunnel, so you have data coming into the PSA, and from the PSA if you want to move data to your data target, you remember that your PSA and your data sources almost are one and the same. Alright, So the data source is something where we define the structure, but that is exactly what structure we're defining is for the PSA. So when you load data from your source into the PSA, it means that it's pretty much the structure that we've defined at the data source. So though they have different names as data source and PSA, data source is technically the place where we create the structure. PSA is the actual staging area where you would have that structure created and your data being loaded there once you bring it from the source. So your the transformation is the one that will connect your data source or your PSA to your actual data target, right? So bringing the data just to the PSA doesn't suffice our uh, cause. We'll have to go ahead and bring that data to your data target. So for you to bring the data to your data target, you would have to have transformations, and at your transformation is where you can write a lot of business rules, right? So you might have to do lookups on other tables. You might want to go and add some constant values. You might want to give some exceptions in there. You want to probably delete a particular set of data. All that can be handled at your transformation level, right? And how do you create a transformation is basically once you define the data source, you can right click on this particular info object that you brought into the info provider menu, right click on it and say create transformation, or to be specific, or let's say you're loading to the attribute, right click on the attribute and say create transformation. When you click on create transformation, the system will ask you, this is the object to which I'm loading, but from where am I getting my data? Is it from a data source? So you go mention what is the object that you're getting it from. A data source. So let's say data source, the name of the data source that you create, and the source system that you're using. So you mention both of that detail, and it will create a transformation. It will show you by default the mapping between the source, which is the data source, and the target, which is your data target. So between the objects, it will show some transformation. So you just need to go ahead and activate that particular transformation, and that is seen at this level where you have the transformation. All right. So once the transformation is done, you can go and look at your data flow. You get a picture about what you actually have ended up creating the entire flow. All right. So right click on this particular object and say, or you can right click on the main info object and say create or display data flow. So you get a picture of what exactly you have defined. So for data to come in from here, you basically have to use something called as an info package. You get that again if you right click on your data source. So if you right click on the data source, you get the option for creating the info package. All right, that's the one that we use for loading. Once we load this data through the info package, that data is picked up from, so data comes to the PSA level. Once data is at the PSA level, for you to pick up that data from the PSA, push it to the data target, you will have the DTP or the data transfer process. Remember, the DTP is something that will help you with the movement of data between any objects within the BW system. Within the BW system, there is nothing else that will help you with the movement of data except the DTP. Even if you want to move it from a PSA to the data target, or from a DSO object to InfoCube, or even from an InfoCube to a Open Hub service where you want to push out data from the BW, it's only the DTP that will help you. All right, so remember that you can right click on the folder here to create the DTP, and then you can load the data. All right, so these are the steps that are involved. Any questions?
Yeah, right now it's totally blank. I mean, we need to review one more time on the recording, and then we'll get some more questions for sure.
It's not just the recording. Make sure that you get your connections, and then make sure that you're practicing this. We're also doing a fast track, right? So it is something that I would want you all to make some extra time to get some practice in, so that you are ready for the next session, because we're building it one after the other. Fundamentals of creating these objects through the flat files is what we're trying to do, lay a little foundation before we go into the big step of actually extracting data from ECC. So you understand the flow here, and then that becomes a little easy when you're trying to deal with data coming in from the actual transaction system. Right. So do not procrastinate. Just go ahead.
Emmanuel, Rajiv here. Yeah, Emmanuel, Rajiv here. I tried yesterday, today, I'm in the US, so I tried during the US time when it could have been night in India to this, but the system always shows a dump and it's very difficult even
Really?
getting one. Yeah, and emails sent
When
to
did you
Ravi and
try?
all, emails sent to Ravi do not get answered also.
Okay. All right.
So I thought,
Because I do at very weird times. I do time zones of US, Canada, New Zealand, and all this. But I did not have an issue actually connecting to the server. But what time of US time zone did you actually try to connect? Sometime during the day, is it? Did you connect during the
yeah,
day?
during the daytime, afternoon, after lunch, Eastern Standard Time.
Uh-huh. All right. I hope you have my email address. Just send me an email, and I'll see if I can do something about it.
I don't have your email
Yeah,
address.
thanks.
Okay, once.
Yeah, can you send across a mail to all of us, Emmanuel?
I put that email on the chat.
It's chicky8.
At gmail.com.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Just put in a screenshot of whatever error you're getting through, and then just send an email. I also have an American number. You can call me on that. All right. So yeah, I'll give you that number a little later on. But anyways, you can always mail me on that email address. I'll be available. All right. Any other questions? Rajiv, Jyotsna, China, and Sheikh. I hope you're getting a gist of what we're actually trying to do. All right. So this is the same thing that will go through all through this training. Okay. We're getting data, loading it, putting into another target. That flow will be the same. Probably at the beginning it's a little new. What are we trying to do? What is the data source? What is the seriatic transformation? What are we trying to connect? Don't get a little perplexed. Just go with the actual setting as to what should happen one after the other. You will make sense out of what we're doing. Right? So we keep loading this so many times that automatically that flow will come into the head. But make that little effort in the beginning to just actually see and do it yourself. I'll tell you stories in the class. Don't just go by that. You go and do it practically at home, and that will be what will stick in your head. All right. So get your connections. I'll also speak with Kalyan to arrange for the connections. Start practicing from day one itself. All right. And we're on the same server. All of you will have the access to the same server. So in case you have any doubts, you can always peep through and see if it's the same thing that we've created here as well. So create your own info areas. Go ahead and name it by your name or give it a special name, and then make sure you create your objects separately. All right. And I'll tell you when you guys can go ahead and start creating objects from the objects that we have created in class. Okay. Anything else? Any other questions?
Is anybody going to send the recorded link again? Just like this.
I'll ask Rajiv to send the recording link. Rajiv or Rajesh or Koti. So one of them will be sending you the recording.
Yeah, I think I need that for sure.
All right. Yeah. What are the class timings over the weekend? Okay. Tomorrow probably we'll be doing it at the same time. For this weekend, I'll stick with the same times because I am not at Hyderabad. I'm at my hometown. But next weekend, we probably will be doing an extended session probably during the day as well. Okay. So this week it will not be too cramped, and also I'll give you time for you to go and practice your fundamentals. So once you do that, once you're on track, we can pick up speed.
So this week, are you saying same time, Saturday and Sunday?
Same time. That's true.
Okay.
All right. Okay, guys. I will see you around tomorrow, same time, and then we'll have more things to talk about. All right. Take care for now. Have a nice evening.
You too. Thank you, Emmanuel.
Bye.
Bye.
Yep.
The organizer has ended